Hey everybody. So today we have a very special guest with us today to discuss all things Marvel. And that includes the movies, the parks, everything Marvel. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for many years. And his name is Tyler. Tyler, how you doing, man?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. So where can everyone at home find you on social
Uh,
media?
on Twitter, at Wraith Kelso, Wraith like a ghost and Kelso like from that '70s show.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, give him a follow. If you're into theme parks, Marvel, all that good stuff, Tyler has a lot of great insight on everything in regards to that. So, Tyler, today I wanted to discuss, you're a huge Marvel fan, and I wanted to bring you on and really talk about everything going on right now with Marvel and whether that be the movies or the parks. And the first thing I really wanted to talk to you about was the movie slate, okay? Because we all know right now the coronavirus is the elephant in the room right now, and Black Widow has been pulled from its release spot. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you think they're gonna drop it onto like a video on demand? Do you think they're just gonna put it on Disney Plus? What are they gonna do?
So I think we've got a couple things to look at here. First is how long the coronavirus quarantining continues and the shutdowns of the movie theaters continue. Um, Black Widow and even outside of Marvel, Mulan are two movies that have both been delayed, understandably so. But those two movies specifically uh, stand to make Disney a lot of money when they get released uh, theatrically at some point. And I'm sure that no matter what they do, at some point we will see them on a big screen, even if for like a limited engagement situation. Um, Depending on how long the theaters stay closed, though, I think is going to be a huge factor in the decision making process. If the theaters reopen in June, then I think we could still see Black Widow get a theatrical release, possibly in June or July. Um, if the theaters remain closed past then we might see a shift in the thought, because the way that Marvel has kind of worked over the last bunch of years is basically a long form TV series in the format of film. Um, by doing so, it makes it really difficult when they have to pull a movie from the release schedule that may or may not be having any kinds of ties into, say, um, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the first Disney Plus series, which has also been paused on filming. Um, so looking at that, I think it's most likely that they want to release it theatrically, but I think that if the theaters remain closed too long, then I think there's a good chance we see it VOD. And then it's a question of, will they do it the same method that they did with Onward, where you can just purchase it right away, or will they do what Universal has done with their films and make it so that it's a $20 rental? I'm not sure what they would do in that situation, but I do like what they did with Onward, so I would hope they go that
Yeah,
route.
yeah. I hope they figure something out. It's crazy with the video on demand thing because while on its surface it seems like a good option for them, and it is. I mean, in an emergency situation, they can definitely utilize that. The problem is they will almost certainly lose a little bit of profit from doing it that way, just because with a movie theater, each person's forced to buy a ticket. Video on demand, I can buy it and have like 30 friends over. We could all watch together. That's a big
Exactly.
issue. Yeah, but
Exactly.
if it comes down to it where there's no other option, some money is better than no money, I guess.
Which is then the next thing they need to factor in, yeah, because you have, say, a family of four going to a theater that's you know good $50 in ticket sales just for the tickets, and that's if they go not at late at night screenings. Um, but then, if they do a $20 purchase on VOD, then okay, well, they're making some of that money back, but it won't be nearly as much, especially because if they do the VOD, I think most people that would purchase it that way would have already done so and would have also gone to the theater. So they'd be missing out on quite a bit on the theatrical end. But they might not have much choice because they've got so many things down the slate that, you know, if they push Black Widow to November, for example, then do they have to also push the Disney Plus releases? Eternals would have to get pushed, then Shang-Chi, and down the line they all get pushed down. Um, my hope would be that they choose to give us a release a little earlier either way. I'm not sure if it would be easier to do it via VOD or theatrical at this point, though. And Disney Plus, of course, would be a wonderful option, but I suspect that it wouldn't be immediately on Disney Plus just because of the money involved.
Now, what's the next? You mentioned Eternals. Is that the next theatrical Marvel movie after Black Widow? And when does that one come out, or when's it supposed to come out?
Yeah, so Eternals is the next one after Black Widow, and that one is supposed to be coming out. I want to say early November, roughly that time frame that um, uh, well, about when Venom came out a couple years ago, or let's see, I believe the last two Thor movies came out around that same time. So that part of the calendar. So it'd be before the next Disney animated release around Thanksgiving, but I'd want to say after Halloween.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of November. I mean, they're kind of up against a hard wall there because they don't want to push Black Widow too far down and then potentially hurt Eternals. So hopefully they can get it in theaters, like you said, this summer, and then it'll give enough breathing room for Eternals in November. But if this whole thing goes on for much longer and they're forced to we're getting into like September, October, then they're really in a tough bind because November comes around with Eternals, and you can't really. They might start cannibalizing some of their movies if they release it too close to each other. Although it's Marvel, and I don't know, they kind of can win no matter what. So maybe not. We'll see, but it'll be interesting.
Marvel movies would be okay because I think there's a fan base for those that will come out no matter what. But they've got other movies that aren't Marvel that come out between now and then. Also Mulan to factor in, which was supposed to be this last weekend. You've got The Jungle Cruise this summer. You've got Artemis Fowl this summer. You've got the next Pixar movie in June. And all of those could potentially end up getting delayed releases as well. And then that also it'll make a bigger issue of, well, if Black Widow gets delayed and then they have to go up against Eternals with it, then they also have all their other movies that they have to worry about as well. On one hand, thankfully, no Star Wars release this year to worry about.
Yes, yeah, that is very true. And actually, that was going to be my next question to you. So it's perfect segue. Perfect segue. So now there's no question. I mean, it's objectively, a fact at this point where that, Marvel is kicking major butt in the box office, film after film after film after film. They become a cultural beast, of a franchise, the MCU. Now, Star Wars, though, it's a huge franchise, no doubt, but the last few movies have struggled a lot more than Marvel has, and there's been more of a divided fan base. If there was anything that you would like to see Lucasfilm adopt from Marvel to kind of improve the situation and get people energized again about Star Wars, what would you want them to adopt?
Okay, so there's a couple things they could do. I think part of the challenge is that when you look at the last bunch of Star Wars films, Force Awakens did really, really well theatrically, and yes, it was kind of paint by numbers of A New Hope, but it reinvigorated the fan base, got us all excited for the next movies, and then Rogue One was brand new characters that we'd never met before, and it was a really good quality film. And then you get into The Last Jedi, which is my personal favorite of the new era of films. But it started to create the divide within the fan base for this new era. And I think that what we've seen with The Mandalorian and how insanely popular it has been, and even Star Wars Rebels was really popular. I think what we're seeing is that with Star Wars, potentially the problem they ran into was doing the legacies of Luke, Han, Leia, and Chewie, as opposed to just giving us brand new characters. And then the other thing that Marvel does that Star Wars isn't is they're looking at their back catalog of decades worth of books and adapting them. They're saying, hey, we have this Civil War comic book from, the early 2000s. Let's adapt it for a film. And that's not what Star Wars has been doing. They haven't been going, hey, here's this set of books. We're going to adapt it to a film. I think that one of the smartest things they could possibly do would be to do a Knights of the Old Republic trilogy. As like, I love Marvel, but I also love Star Wars, and Knights of the Old Republic is by far my favorite of the games. I try to play through that at least every other year just because it's so fun. And I think that would, like, a Darth Revan story would be one of the most interesting things they could do for a film. And then I think the other thing is to then look at options for just creating new characters and new stories going forward that aren't necessarily just, oh, hey, we're going to say, here's another TV series for Rey or Ben Solo or any of them. They're great characters and I'd love to see them again. But I think that they have kind of painted themselves into a corner with the situation they're at now. Now, one thing I do applaud Star Wars for over what Marvel has done is they've said that from the point of Disney purchasing all film and TV, and technically even the games and books, they all count. And Marvel hasn't done that. Marvel has kept their comic book arm separate from the film arm, and up until now, the TV shows have been their own beast, where according to the TV shows they counted, but according to the film side, they didn't count. And it's been a fun little thing there. And I think that there's a little bit of a mix of both approaches would be perfect for both franchises. I think that having the TV shows be able to interact with the films would be a really fun way to do things. And I honestly think that now that we have Disney Plus, and I think there's going to be a huge shift in what gets made for theatrical releases going forward, thanks to what we're seeing now. And we were already starting to see this shift. What I could see them doing is, hey, let's introduce a character in a film, and then let's put them on Disney Plus for a year or two, and then do basically just event films where they can cross-pollinate. Basically you would have your introductory film. Let's use Marvel as an example. So let's say you get Shang-Chi in an introductory film, and then you get a series on Disney Plus, and then the next time you see him is in the next big team up. And I think Star Wars could do something similar where they do an introduction in film and then move to Disney Plus to continue the storyline. Mandalorian has proved that they can definitely handle doing a live action show. And Rebels was even an incredible animated series. So I think they do have some options, but I don't necessarily think that it's a Kennedy versus a Feige thing. I think that it's more to do with just how they've decided to go forward. And I honestly would even put part of it even on Bob Iger. I think that, he's been a great CEO for his tenure. But I think that there were some decisions that they made, even as high up as him, that they probably made the wrong decisions, unfortunately. I think that if they had chosen to adapt a specific set of books that were from the sequel trilogy era, instead of going with, hey, let's come up with our own new story that basically feels like a paint by numbers of the originals, I think that probably would have worked out much better for them.
Yeah, no, definitely. You brought up a ton of great points here. And early on, you mentioned one of the big issues was, you know, you wanted new characters, new stories like The Mandalorian and things like that. And that's a great point, because I think the point of contention for a lot of fans in the fan base right now, the reason why the fan base is divided for the most part is mostly because of the handling of the legacy characters. You know, the Luke Skywalker and what have you. And I think that if they would have focused like they did with The Mandalorian, where you would have had it set, you know, in a time period that we all love, and you introduce great new characters, it was still Star Wars, still felt like Star Wars, but there were new characters. There wasn't 40 years of expectations tacked onto those characters, you know, and that's what the sheer brilliance of Dave Filoni and Favreau, you know, with The Mandalorian, because a lot of people were saying, but prior to The Mandalorian coming out, why don't they just make it Boba Fett, right? If you're going to have a bounty hunter Mandalorian, why don't you just have Boba Fett? It makes more sense the way they did it. If they would have had Boba Fett, they would have had the same drama inevitably that Disney's having with the sequel trilogy. The handling of Boba Fett, not my Boba Fett. This isn't the Boba Fett I know. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It was so smart how they handled it, and it was familiar enough, but it was new enough. It was the perfect mix. You also touched upon Bob Iger, and I completely agree with you. I'm a huge fan of Bob Iger. I think he's been a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal CEO, but there have been mistakes done with Star Wars. And I think a lot of people, you know, they kind of, you know, they want Kathleen Kennedy to be fired and what have you. And I think the reason why she hasn't been fired, to be quite honest, is because a lot of the decisions made weren't even hers. I think a lot of it probably was Iger. So he can't fire her for her just doing what, you know, he told her to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, even, you know, looking at the parks, I haven't gotten to go to Galaxy's Edge yet, because my initial thought process was, you know, I had been to Disney World the summer that Pandora opened, and I saw how nuts that was. And I was like, well, Star Wars is like Avatar times 10 for crowd pleasement. And so I thought, well, I'm going to wait until later. I will go after the hype has died down. Then, of course, now we've got, you know, parks are closed, and, you know, theoretically, the Avengers Campus is supposed to be opening soon. And so that's going to bring in more hype and more crowd, but maybe take a little bit away from Galaxy's Edge, make it a little bit less hectic. But, you know, there are a few things that I think that even with Galaxy's Edge that, you know, they nailed it on a lot, but there are things that I think that they missed on. I think that setting it in a specific time period and saying that it is specifically between episodes 8 and 9, I think that was a mistake. I think that really ties the hands of their options going forward for a new attraction or character meet and greet potentials. You know, you don't get to have Captain Phasma marching around with the First Order within Galaxy's Edge, where it would totally make sense. Instead, it's still in Tomorrowland.
Right.
And it's just strange. Like, I think that they pull for what they set out to do, they did an excellent job. I just think that they could have done a few things that would have made it so that, oh, Darth Vader could do a meet and greet in the area. Oh, they could do a Jedi training show that instead of just being on the Tomorrowland Terrace stage, it could have had its own purpose-built area, and it could have been like a true Trials of the Temple sort of a situation, like go to the Jedi Temple, do the trials, and at the end of that, then you have the option of the build your own lightsaber or, you know, something else, because the build your own lightsabers are awesome, but they're also quite expensive. You know, so if they did it in like a Trial of the Temple way, I'm kind of picturing like how Universal has their Ollivander's wand shop, where you can go do the story area first, and then you don't have to buy the wand later. You don't
Right.
have to spend the $50 on a wand. You can choose to, but it's not mandatory. And I think it would be cool if there was some sort of a like Face Your Fears Trial of the Temple walkthrough as a small attraction in the area. I think that would be incredible. And then looking at what they're doing with the Marvel area, I have my reservations about how it's going to be in the end, mainly because, like, how do you pull off an Avengers area With Star Wars, you can at least go, okay, it's all on one planet.
Right.
How do you do that with Marvel and go, okay, you got the Guardians of the Galaxy, you got Thor, you've got all these different Avengers characters that you can choose from. Now, my hope is that the area ends up being amazing. I think it will. The Spider-Man ride, everything we've seen about it. At first, I was very hesitant on it because it looked like it was just going to be a Toy Story Mania 2.0. But it's still looking like it's going to be pretty good. And then as we look forward past the initial opening, I'm really hoping that budget cuts don't cause them to cut that Avengers e-ticket that's supposed to be coming, because that looks incredible. That looks like it's supposed to basically be like a cross between the Harry Potter Kuka arm technology and a simulator, and it looks like it's going to be really fun. And then, I mean, there are other options they can do down the line for new attractions. Like, one thing that I would love to see is a Mystic Manor meets Doctor Strange and make it the Sanctum Sanctorum. I think that'd be just the perfect blending of a ride tech with a story. And then I also think that you have a lot of fun options with Black Panther doing like a ride simulator, thanks to the technology we saw in that film. But man, I'm getting nervous about Avengers Campus due to, I don't think they were expecting to be closed for this much time when they made their announcement about opening. I think when they made the announcement, they probably factored in a couple weeks of closure, but not months. So
Yeah, it's going to be a long time, and you brought up a great point about the comparisons between building a themed land for Star Wars and building a themed land for Avengers and Marvel. Star Wars has an advantage when it comes to themed areas because there's so many planets and different, it's a whole galaxy full of exotic places, and there's so much there you can lift from, and places you want to visit, right? Marvel, the focus on that franchise is a lot different than Star Wars. With Marvel, it's the superheroes themselves that are the special aspect of that franchise, not so much the locations. The locations, for the most part, aside from like Wakanda, the locations are mostly typical of our world. New York, I think Tony Stark lives in Malibu. They're in our world, so the characters are the special thing of that franchise. So it's harder to craft a cool immersive land around that, and especially when you throw in the fact that it's in California Adventure, right? Now you have to kind of tailor it around California to at least some degree. It makes it a lot more complicated. It's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I remember way before they ever announced what they were planning on doing, I had done like some armchair imagineering of like, okay, to best utilize the spaces, and knowing that something for Marvel and something for Star Wars are coming. This was before they announced even the Guardians of the Galaxy takeover of the tower. My thought was turn the Toy Story lot into a third park, make it for both of those franchises, and have it be roughly split down the middle of Star Wars and Marvel, and then even fit in, you could have put Incredibles in with your superheroes, you could have put Big Hero 6 there, and then you could put some other random like Disney hero characters like Hercules in that area, and it could have been a heroes and villains sort of a thing. Could have been
That'd be
really,
awesome.
really interesting. But then also, and here's the other thing where, in a way, Marvel has a benefit over Star Wars is because it takes place in our world, they won't have the problem that the Galaxy's Edge has now, where people are like, well, I'm in Star Wars, but where are the droids? Where are the aliens?
Right.
That is one benefit Marvel will have, is they don't have that problem. They'll have, the slate of characters for that area is intense. I never would have expected in my wildest dreams that we'd be getting Ant-Man and Wasp and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and Captain Marvel and America and everybody else that they've listed. And it's like, this is nuts. How are we getting this many characters? And like some of them are probably going to be doing mostly stunt shows with maybe a little bit of meet and greet, but that's still like you're going to get to see the characters. And I think like for someone like me, that's a huge part of why I go to Disney, is to see the character interactions. Um, so with the rumors of like when they reopen, they might be limiting character engagement, and I'm like, that's not what I want to hear. That's like the reason I go is for the characters.
Yeah.
But understandable for now if they do go that route. I would understand it. It would just kind of suck, but that is one benefit that Avengers is going to have over Marvel, is they're not going to have that issue of, well, but where are all the aliens? You know.
Well, yeah, and from what we're hearing, like with that Spider-Man Stuntronic and stuff, the character presence in the Avengers Campus is going to be pretty incredible. I mean, I can't wait to see that thing in action, and I'm so curious how they're going to implement that in the real world and have it perform like 3 or 4 times a day.
Right.
It's going to be very, very cool. So it'll be very interesting. Now, by the way, I do want to mention, I kind of want to go back to what you said a little bit ago. Your idea of a Doctor Strange Mystic Manor dark ride is incredible. I mean, that is a really that's pretty awesome, man. I love that idea. That would fit perfect.
Right? No, like I sometimes I look at the movies and I think, okay, this could make a fun ride at some point somehow, or at the very least character meet and greets. But with Doctor Strange, I watched that and I was like, oh, they have options here. They could do a Mystic Manor meets Doctor Strange, and this would be so awesome. And it's like a perfect blending.
Yeah.
Honestly, more so than any of the other ideas that they've brought forward so far. The Guardians version of Tower of Terror is, personally, I like it more. I understand why some people disagree with that, but I actually enjoy it more because like they changed it from scaring you to making you laugh.
Right.
It makes it just more fun and enjoyable.
No, that renovation, the transformation from Tower, because the thing with our Tower of Terror was it was always kind of in the shadow of Florida's, because we never had, it wasn't as elaborate, and it was always like Tower of Terror light, so to speak, right? But it's cool now that we have Mission Breakout, because now we have DCA has its own unique thing. It's no longer living in the shadow of something in Florida. We have our own thing. So I think it was definitely an upgrade. I think a lot of people were really, really apprehensive of the change when we heard about it initially, because it was so weird. But yeah. Joe Rohde, which I think he was the head Imagineer on that project, he hit a home run. I mean, it's so good.
Yeah, no, he did great, because I got to experience it when I went there for my first Halloween party. Was the year that had opened, and I was like, okay, try it out during the day, and I was like, this is awesome. And then I was like, wait, there's a overlay for Halloween as well?
And that's even better.
Oh my goodness, what? And especially because when you do them both in the same day, the Halloween overlay is basically 5 minutes after the regular ride,
right?
I just love that they actually had gotten everything ready to the point where it was a quick, all right, let's flip a switch and let's do it, as opposed to some of the other rides when they do the overlays and it's like, oh, we have to close for like a week to get it set up, so we can't just quickly do one. So that is one huge benefit to it, is that they can do that, and it'd be kind of fun if they did like a Christmas overlay at some point too. That would be entertaining beyond reason, but I was blown away by that ride, and the exterior of the building, I understand why people have issues with it, because it looks a bit out of place.
Yeah.
But then even looking at that whole park, like when it first opened, I always kind of thought of it as like trying to be a little bit of Animal Kingdom and a little bit of Epcot and a little bit of Hollywood Studios. And it, ever since the 2012 rededication, it's really taken on some incredible new attractions, and with exception of a little bit in Hollywood and a little bit in the pier, it's really turned around, in my book at least, and become my favorite of the second parks.
Definitely, Tyler. I mean, I echo your sentiments about that park. I absolutely love DCA. I think it's really grown into a solid secondary park. And, you mentioned Mission Breakout, sticking out kind of like a sore thumb. And I agree with you on that right now. I think that it does kind of stand out. But I think that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to with Avengers Campus is that now that ride will fit in, right? It's actually going to have the other Marvel stuff around it. And maybe aesthetically, it's not going to all look like Mission Breakout, but it'll at least have an area and at least match its surroundings. It belongs where it is. Like right now, it's kind of in no man's land. It doesn't really feel like Hollywood. It doesn't really feel like anything. And in a few months, at least it'll start to feel like it belongs in its land. And maybe they'll even change the backstory to the attraction to make it fit in even more so with Avengers Campus and everything.
Yeah.
So,
and I remember when it opened, what they were saying was that the Collector's Fortress was like a traveling fortress, basically, and pops up on different planets, and so that's why you literally can see it in one of the shots during Thor Ragnarok in the background on that planet. But then, now it's in DCA, and it's a little bit jarring, but I think that once the rest of Avengers Campus opens, I think it'll be better. Now, I will say that on one hand, I get why they decided to put a pause on the construction efforts in the parks due to the closure. But on the other hand, I'm thinking to myself, man, this would be a great opportunity to get caught up on all those refurbishments. And like, imagine if when Epcot reopened, they had Ratatouille 100% ready to go, and they could say, reopened with a new attraction.
Yeah. It frustrated me a little bit. I mean, I understood the situation. Obviously, the construction workers, their safety is number one, right? I mean, there's no doubt. But it also frustrated me as a Disney fan, as a Disney nerd, that we can't just go in there now. Because, for the longest time, we heard it was really difficult to remove like the people mover tracks because of the way they are in the land and anything like that. Right now would be a perfect time to go in there and knock those suckers out, right? I mean, there's nobody there, and it's like, oh man, it's so frustrating. But what can you do?
Yeah, for sure. Like whether it's that, and I'm sure there are some casts that are still on hand, whether California or Florida. Florida probably more so because both resorts are going to need minimal security just to make sure no one tries to like hop the fences while nobody's there. That'd be pretty bad. And then I'm sure that they also have cast on hand to tend to the animals. At the very least, the ones that they that aren't just wild animals like the ducks, but the horses and everything. And then in Florida, dear Lord, they've got so many animals. They've got to have somebody taking care of them. But it is quite sad seeing the state that we're in now. And I'm curious to see if when we finally get a reopening date for the parks, if Avengers Campus will get delayed, because they put a date on that announcement. They didn't just say coming this summer. They put a date. So,
yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and that actually was that's actually the last question I wanted to leave you with today. I wanted to get your opinion on this actually. With the whole coronavirus shutdown, and they recently announced that the parks are closed indefinitely. What's your guess? What do you think? When do you think we're going to see a reopening of these parks?
So I'm of two minds. On one hand, I kind of like that Knott's gave the opening date. On the other hand, I'm glad Disney isn't pulling a Universal and going another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. But at the same time, indefinitely might have been the best option in this case because we don't know for sure when they will be able to reopen safely due to the health concerns. And I think that internally they might be guesstimating, hopefully for Memorial Day, but they don't want to publicly say that because as soon as they say, oh, it'll be Memorial Day, then they're going to have to delay it again.
Right.
And I can imagine Memorial Day would be a huge opportunity for them if they can get it reopened by then. And even looking at, they are accepting reservations starting June 1st. So I would guess that they expect to be open by then. But there's no guarantees because like my state, we unfortunately were pretty much the start of the coronavirus spread in this country. So,
Wow.
that's fun. And we started with my school district closed for a couple days, then closed for 2 weeks. Then in the middle of that, the governor goes, "All right, schools are out for 6 weeks," and it's like, "Wait, what?" And that was when it kind of started hitting that, oh, this is real. And then starting to see everything else close, and it's just like, this is nuts. And no company is going to voluntarily close and cost themselves 20 to 40 million dollars a day in revenue, which is what Disney is losing from the parks being closed. You
Unbelievable.
know, that's a huge amount of money on the line. They wouldn't have closed if they didn't feel like there was a genuine need to do so for public health.
Oh
And I
yeah.
don't think they will reopen until they are confident that it'll be safe.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree with you. And I think that I don't think the parks are going to reopen the same way. Like, I don't think we're going to just get like one day they'll just be open. It'll be business as usual. I think they'll probably do like a phased reopen. I think like maybe we'll see, okay, downtown Disney is open right now. And then in 2 weeks
Yeah,
after that, we'll see maybe just California Adventure opening, or maybe the parks will open, but they'll just be like, they're only like 50% capacity. Or I think it's going to be like a slow rollout. I can't imagine them just allowing everyone to just back in and it's just
yeah,
business as usual. Cause it's going to be,
yeah.
I
I
don't
can
imagine that the
definitely see the
corona
stores being
threat will be completely eliminated when it reopens. I think it'll be minimized greatly, but I'm sure there's still going to be a little bit of apprehension there, you know?
Yeah, and I have friends that have let me know from conversations they've had with people that are kind of in the know on this that they're saying to prep for potentially up to 18 months on this,
Wow.
which is nuts.
Yeah, man.
And that's my state. I don't know for sure if that would be nationwide, but my state is prepping for that. We've got events scheduled for August that we're like, well, maybe they'll happen, but we don't know for sure.
Wow.
Everything through June in my state has been canceled. We were supposed to have Emerald City Comic Con earlier this month, and that got postponed to August, but we'll see if they can even keep that date because they might not be able to. It sounds like the state fairs are probably not going to happen this year. It's a truly unprecedented time.
It is. It is. And I wanted to leave it with this. I want to say that Tyler, thank you for coming on today. And you are always, always, always welcome on my channel. If we should definitely do this again. Come on, talk about the parks and Marvel, Star Wars, whatever you want to talk about. The door is always open. And I also want to say, I want you and your family to be safe and healthy during all this, because this stuff is scary, man.
Yeah, no, and same to you on the be safe and healthy, and to everyone watching as well. Like, take the public health officials' advice on what to do in your area. If they're saying, self distancing and quarantine is necessary, take it seriously because, we don't want to be responsible for our grandparents dying from this. That would be awful. And yeah, I would happily come back on for other topics at some point, whether that's parks or, anything else. So.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Tyler. And thank you all for watching. And again, follow Tyler on Twitter. I'm going to actually put his Twitter handle down below, so you'll be able to see that, and go ahead and give him a follow. He does a lot of great stuff on theme parks and nerd culture, Star Wars, Marvel, all that great stuff. So give him a follow. Thanks again, Tyler, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.